Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk It Out podcast. I'm your host and moderator, Alec Lifschultz, a.k.a. Trey Busy. I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your busy Tuesday to come have this conversation with us. I want to thank Rayson Chu for coming on last Thursday. He gave a very great interview. I learned a lot from him, a lot of his practices that he, puts out there for others. I try to, just incorporate them into my routine over the weekend, and I felt like it was very successful for me. So I want to really thank him for coming on Thursday. It was just really a blessing for a lot of people, and everyone was positively affected by it. Good evening, chat room. I see people coming in saying, hey, It's a happy Tuesday, man. The weather is great. We are alive. We are doing well. So before I go on too much further, I want to bring on my very special guest. She has her own podcast called Happiness Abound. I want her to come on and tell you a little bit about herself. Taylor, can you please tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So as he mentioned, I am Taylor Proctor, and I have a daily podcast called Happiness Abound, where I share daily tips and exercises, techniques, and thoughts to help people remember that they are capable of happiness abound in their lives.
That sounds pretty amazing. Give me your tip for today. What did you talk about today on your podcast?
So today I have theme weeks. So this week's theme is all about making a case for journaling. And today specifically was talking about that fear that we all kind of have in the back of our minds about someone else reading it and getting over that fear so that we can reap the full benefits of journaling.
So I encourage people all the time to, if you have ideas or thoughts or things that are on your mind, you don't necessarily need a journal. I mean, journal is actually like the correct term for it, but just like be able to just write things down, just to be able to free yourself and express yourself when these thoughts are coming on your mind. I encourage people all the time to do that. So I can only imagine. I mean, I've never been in a situation where I felt like I had a journal that was going to get read. Usually when I write something down, I don't have to worry about anybody coming behind me to look at it. So.
Well, and it's really interesting because I mentioned today, I was like, if you're worried about your spouse or your partner reading it, that's a totally different ballgame. But for a lot of my clients, a lot of my female clients, they are worried about their kids in the future reading it and seeing they're not perfect. And so there's a lot of mindset shifting that we do when we are like, here's all these benefits of journaling and decluttering your mind and organizing your thoughts and expressing your emotions and sharing these experiences. And if we can't share them in full in journal form, we can't reap the benefits. And if we're not sharing them in full because we don't want our kids 20 years from now to say, wow, mom was not perfect, then that's a problem. Because, and I use this example with my clients that have daughters specifically, and it's, if you had a rough day and you're writing about it and you're sharing how you worked through it, 20 years from now, when your daughter picks up this journal, or 40 years, like whenever you're gone, your daughter picks this up and she reads that you had the perfect day and she's having a bad day, then she'll feel like she's broken or there's something wrong with her, and we're perpetuating this perfectionist cycle. So let's break it for ourselves through our journaling, reap all those benefits, and know that if someone were to read this in the future and be the people that can learn from it, not the people that are like, yeah, grandma or mom was just this perfect person and apparently like life never happened to her. Let's break that cycle and share and teach and educate afterlife through your journaling processes. So it's like a long-term game, but there's a lot of my clients who are like, well, I don't want my kids to read that I really had a rough day today. And I'm like, why? Because if they read that in the future, then they'll see that it's okay to have rough days and you can survive and you can work through it, and they loved you anyways. So maybe if they have a rough day, they'll know that their kids will love them anyways too. And it breaks that cycle of perfectionism.
I was literally just thinking about that. Like, you're creating an unrealistic, thought or process in your kid's mind. If, like you said, you don't keep it real with your journals. You act like everything was perfect. So they grow up and they start feeling like because things aren't going like how it worked for you, or like you said, everything has to be going right for you. And if something's not going right for you, there's something wrong with them. But that's life. Life is all about things not going right. I'm sorry, that sounds bad, but it's true. It's how you
Absolutely.
it's how you
It's how we
adjust
learn
to
and
it.
grow.
Yeah, it's how you adjust to it that defines your character. So that's pretty amazing. I mean, you gave the example, and before I could even ask the question, you gave the answer. I don't even know why I'm hitting right now.
Well, and the other thing that I mentioned in it was you could write an entire journal and nobody says you have to pass it on to your kids. You can burn that. Like, it's don't do something to hinder your development and your emotional management because you're worried about somebody else reading it. Like, you can control whether someone else reads it or not, but by not taking advantage of all those benefits, you're just really hurting yourself with this thought that it needs to be perfect and it has to be read.
So and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's mostly for me personally. I think the writing is just for you. It's not for, like you said, say if your kids find it or something. Okay, that's fine. But for me, I feel like the writing is for you just to express yourself. Just so you could get those thoughts out your head.
100%.
And you could come back and read them later. And even when you move on or you're in a better position in life or you're a better spot mentally, you could come back and read on it and reflect upon it, and just make sure you don't go in those same steps to be like where you were back when you wrote those words down. That's how I feel about journaling.
Absolutely. And there's this thing that I personally, this is how I started using journaling, is I would find that if a situation happened and it made me angry, this will go a little bit into my backstory of how I became a happiness mentor. But I used to be a very angry and very victimized person. And not really victimized, like I just thought I was the victim. And I would hold on to these situations that made me angry. And instead of like writing them out, I felt like I had to remember all the wrong things that person A did to me. And so to continue to remember it, I had to continue to retell the story and relive the emotions. And I had to tell other people so that I felt justified in continuing to hold on to this terrible situation that I felt I was wronged. And the second that I was like, you know what? Let's write this out. Let's get this out of my head, out of my body, and let's write it out. And if I ever need to remember it, I can always just pull back out the journal entry. And that has a lot more credibility than me telling the same story for 2 years. Recording what happened 2 days later or a day later or even 2 weeks later has a lot more credibility than me continuing to twist the story so I can hold on to my anger. And so I know a lot of people, myself included originally, that don't want to journal about situations because they think they're going to forget it or they're going to hold on to it. When you can have a record right there, but the true benefit is to get that situation and those emotions and those complex thoughts organized and on paper and out of your body so that you can actually pay attention and focus and move through the situation instead of trying to hold on to it and feel justified.
So, I mean, a saying I like to live by and I like to apply it in my life is that you can't truly be happy if you have hatred in your heart towards somebody or something.
Oh, agreed. Totally agreed.
And I mean, that's something a lot of people ask me if I hate somebody. I try my best. Like, somebody has done me wrong or done me wrong by me, I forgive them. I chop it up as them just, not being happy with themselves or them just, misdirecting anger in my way because I don't do nothing to anybody for somebody to be mad at me. I try to stay to my own lane. And like I said, I don't send out bad vibes towards anybody. So I want to see, my mom said, she's in the chat room, she said, I've had 2 great counselors who stated that journaling has helped me keep my sanity through very traumatic situations. It helps me now to revisit, to encourage the ability to overcome circumstances.
Preach, Mom, preach.
Yeah, here goes Justin. She's preaching. As soon as you say it out loud, whether it be orally or written in art, etc., it doesn't have power over us anymore. He said he just wanted to add that in there. Yeah. It's really
totally agree.
Really powerful.
The ability to express versus suppress is everything. And I think that I believe that we're raised in a culture of suppression, right? We suppress negative emotions, we suppress negative situations. And as we do that, we're suppressing, which means it's getting pushed down and it's got to go somewhere, right? So it's just living in us and causing us to be miserable, causing us to gain weight, causing health problems, all of these things, where if we could turn to a society, and it starts with the individual, where we can express ourselves, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through going out into a field by yourself and yelling it out, doing it in a way that's a positive release and expression is everything to help us move forward. Doing it in a way where we can express it without hurting another person and coming to truly love who we are and what we're going through makes all the difference.
So I wanted to talk about something that you said a few minutes ago when you were saying how someone do wrong by you and you just have like this anger towards them, but there's nothing that you could do about it because of what they did to you. That sounds like my life in my younger years. That's and I always tell people all the time, man. It's like it's crazy how we have so much in common with other people, but we wouldn't even guess it. Most of the time, we hold things in. We feel like we'll be judged for saying something, but in reality, you're just like everybody else. Everybody. We all have something in common. We all live pretty much complex lives where we encounter things. Granted, not all situations are the same, but it's crazy to think about. Because where are you from, Taylor?
I am from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City, Utah, and I am in Chicago. It's crazy. Everything always comes full circle. People think I'm just talking when I say that we have a lot of common with people. You wouldn't even realize it. So, Justice says, ain't working through nothing, and it keeps adding onto the other and projecting onto the world around us. Resentment will kill you. Yes, it will. It's very important to get it out.
Absolutely. And I think too, the more that you follow that like self-awareness journey and you start expressing via journaling, that just like you said, like you can't hold hate in your heart when you're like, you know what? This isn't who I want to be. This isn't the direction I want to take my life. These aren't the emotions I want to hold on to. Sure, you can be angry. We're humans. We're going to have what we define as negative emotions. But if we can express them and work through them, then we can come back to the other side of the pendulum of positive emotions and live the life that we want to live versus the life of anger and fear and anxiety. So yeah, and resentment, it can absolutely kill you over time. It can kill you emotionally, it can kill you physically, it can kill you mentally. There's so many different ways where it may not be killing you physically yet, but it's definitely in those other ways as well.
People rather spread hatred than love. And it's crazy to think about. You see people get on social media and start talking down on others or making fun of people instead of building each other up, man. It's just and that's the way of expressing themselves. And how you say it always comes out. It's coming out like that, and that lets you know people are hurt, that they're suffering through something. So that's why I say a lot of times, like even with work, if someone lashes out at me or something like that, I always chop it up as them having a bad day. And 9 times out of 10, they feel conflicted about it, feel bad about it, and later on down the road, they come to me and apologize about it because they know that's just, I had this going on with me, or and I'm very understanding. And like I said, I'm not who man I was years ago. I've come to grow into understanding why people are who they are and the way they are, because it's the they don't know how to express themselves.
Totally. Have you heard the phrase your mess is your message?
No, I have not, but that should be on a t-shirt.
We got to start making them and selling them. Yeah. No, your mess is your message. And when you can step through that mess and you're on the other side, there's always other people who are back there in the mess, and you can help them by turning your mess into your message of how you've worked through it, which is exactly what you are doing here on your show, right? Exactly what I'm doing on my show is turning that mess of the anger and the resentment and holding on to that to the message of how emotional management and knowing who you want to be and striving towards that and positive and good mental health can make such a difference and change that mess to a message to help others.
Jackie says pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Absolutely.
Yeah, Jackie.
That's 100% true. Justice making fun of the Boston Celtics, talking about their fans are going through it tonight. Yeah, they're gonna need to talk it out, man, when their star players leave. But just saying. So I know you got the Happiness Abound podcast, but tell me a little bit more about the other things that you do, Taylor.
Yeah. So, have the podcast, and that's every weekday. So Monday through Friday. And then I teach monthly training classes where I have in-person and online courses and classes where I teach things like vision boarding, emotional management techniques, declaration statements. I'm currently working on a new course that covers the 5 arenas of self-care. And then I also do one-on-one mentoring and help individuals really transform their lives from unhappiness to happiness. And then on top of all that, I also have a day job where I'm a marketing director.
So it sounds like you work 40 hours a day. No, I'm kidding. That's I don't understand. Like, so you run a podcast every day. You work one on one with people because you have clients, but you also like, and I know marketing is not easy at all. I mean, you work, that's your day job, marketing. How do you do all that in like one day? How does that like, I'm trying to figure that out. I can't wrap my mind around it.
So I am a big advocate of finding your templates. And one of my templates is that if I do not have a lot of things going, I fall into like a deep depression. And it's not a matter of a lot of things, like a lot of people's first thought on that is like, oh, you don't like being by yourself. No, no, no. I love myself. I love being by myself. I set aside time for my own self-care in the different arenas of self-care. And I really enjoy being by myself, but I also really enjoy stretching myself. I hate being stagnant. And so I always like striving and working towards new things. I always like creating new content and sharing messages. And that's my template. And I go a million miles a minute, but I absolutely adore it. And it's when I'm at my best and when I'm happiest.
So would you say that you consider yourself to be a workaholic?
No, not in the sense that like I'm addicted to work. I would definitely say I'm addicted to self-growth. And that being, okay, what my podcast is me sharing in real time the things that I'm learning and improving my life with, and hoping that mess of mine can be a message to share with other people and hopefully help them. So I'm constantly trying to see how I can improve myself and have that be something to help others. So it's not a workaholic thing. I just really love growing and challenging myself. And then I like being able to share that with others. So even in the marketing space, I'm a marketing director. So I lead 3 different teams, one team of 8, one team of 3, and one team of 2. And so then it's about how can I help my team members provide the best work? How can we up level and add value to the client? How can I help my team members improve and move forward professionally in their career? And that may not always be on my team, but how can I set them up for success so they can move on to that next big thing in their life? So it's always about pushing myself on how I can help others. And I definitely don't classify that as a workaholic. I classify that as definitely an addict to self-help and development. But if I was going to be addicted to anything, I would take that over anything else.
No, and for me, I mean, workaholic isn't to me a negative word. For me, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I even on my off days, I always feel like I have something that I need to be doing. You know, it's just like you just feel like you just have to. You know, you're wasting time. That's how I feel. That's why I'm always either in the gym. I mean, I work 6 days a week, creating podcast content. Like, I mean, obviously you understand exactly how that works. You do it every day. So it's like, I feel the same exact way. You know, it's like I feel like I have something I have to be doing. I cannot just be relaxing. I couldn't even picture myself being on a beach somewhere. I'll probably be losing my mind because I'm like, man, I could be just, I need to be on my laptop, you know, creating this content for everybody. Justin has a question for you for the chat room. We said, do you work with adolescents?
I do. I actually, so really fun story. I just finished one of my declarations classes, and one of the people who was in attendance came up to me afterward and was like, my girls in junior high need this and they need it now. Will you teach a declarations class specific for teenagers? So I did. And it was great. It resonated really well with them. And I wish that somebody had been there in my life when I was 14 and started believing that I was unlovable and started telling myself those things. I wish that somebody had taken me to a class and said, here's what declarations are, and let's combat those negative thoughts. And that would have, I don't necessarily think that would have changed the trajectory of my life, but I do think that would have equipped me so much better. So I definitely do help adolescents, both in one-on-one mentoring and in class settings.
Yeah, I just, we don't have the same resources these kids have these days.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. I mean, everything is at the palm of their fingertips. We used to have to ride our bikes to find our friends and stuff like that. We didn't even have cell phones. We had to use house phones. It's crazy to think how far things are, to how they used to
Yeah,
be.
there's definitely a lot more resources. I mean, you say ride your bike to your friend's house. I remember riding my bike to my friend's house and my mom be like, "Call me when you get there." And you had to call from the house phone. You didn't have the electronic leash. And I forgot. And I remember she called the house like 3 times and we were outside playing and she finally drove down and was like, "Why didn't you call me?" And I was like, "Oh, I forgot." She's like, "Okay, well, I thought you were kidnapped, so make sure you call me next time." And it's just like my niece and my nephews now. It's like, "Hey, did you make it home safe?" "Yep." And like it's all through text. It's all easy. It's all right there. Let alone like the ability to listen to podcasts like this one and be younger and get all the advice and the learnings from other people that you wouldn't have had access to back in our day.
No, it's like, I mean, there's no excuse for people not to be able to um, search or research something or find tools or figure out how to do things because it's all available to you. Everything's available to you. And I was just, yeah, it's just crazy. Sometimes I do sit around and reflect upon that. So with with,
Absolutely.
with all this work that you do, for others, and also like I mean, outside of the happiness abound, outside of the one-on-one mentoring, even with the marketing, do you ever feel overwhelmed from that?
No, and that's because I use a lot of self-care. There's definitely a lot of journaling that helps with the overwhelm. There's a technique I use called slaying, which is you have a piece of paper, whether it's typed or handwritten, and you put at the top the emotion you're feeling and because. So if I was feeling overwhelmed, which it can happen, but it doesn't stay for long, I'll put I feel overwhelmed because dot dot dot. And then I will do a bulleted list, but it's not like single items. It's I will kind of complete the story of why I feel overwhelmed. So like the first bullet would be off the top of my head. I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have a lot of projects due all at the same time at work and not enough time. And then the next bullet, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I haven't had a lot of alone time and I feel like I need that to recharge. Next bullet, I feel overwhelmed because I have a book that I need to read for book club by Friday and I haven't started and I haven't prioritized that. Next bullet, right? And you can kind of go down that list and you can express that emotion of overwhelm and get those stories fully out of you. And you can go for 5 minutes or you can go until you have no stories about that left. And then depending on the emotion, so overwhelm, I probably would rip it up, crumple it, and then throw it in the garbage, like kind of gently. Whereas when I write that I'm angry and I do the slang technique, I rip it up like aggressively. I crunch it and I will chuck it, like throw it, baseball throw into the garbage, or I'll light it on fire. So there's different ways of releasing that, but essentially it's the same where you let this emotion go, you write out the story surrounding it, you make sure nobody else reads it. Like if you are angry and a lot of those stories are about your spouse, don't let them read it. It's about getting it out of you onto paper, releasing those stories, those negative emotions, ripping it up, throwing it away so nobody can see it, and then filling it with positive emotions and taking positive next steps. So I do feel overwhelmed occasionally. I feel all those negative emotions just like any other human, but I utilize techniques to help me get back on that positive side of the spectrum and be able to move forward and not be debilitated by those negative emotions, specifically one like overwhelm, which can be very debilitating.
So, I mean, I always I asked because I figured you had some type of way that you're able to handle it. Because, like I said, we're only human. We do sometimes need to find times to ourselves to self care. I learned that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, last Saturday, I went and got a massage, and then relaxed a little bit. Went out to like a little wooded area and just sat out there and just enjoyed the fresh air for a while. Things like that, help me out a lot. You just feel overwhelmed, and that's how I relax. But that technique, writing it down, I mean, I feel this way because of this. And it's so funny. I was joking around in my head. I was thinking, like, what if somebody found a bag with all these like notes in it, And it's like the person that you were talking about found the notes and was like, oh, wow, okay, well.
Well, that's why they're ripped up. They'd have to be putting together puzzle pieces and be really desperate to know why I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's just like, it's just crazy to think about, just you ball one up instead of ripping it up one day and throw it in there, and it's like it falls out on accident. It's like somebody reads it. I doubt that happens. I create scenarios in my head sometimes.
Sure. There is one thing I'd like to mention too, though, that I felt was a big factor in understanding my emotions and allowing myself to feel them and do the sleigh technique. And that was an understanding of my buffering techniques, which I think is a crucial part of emotional management. So I'd love to kind of share what some of the top buffering things are if you're interested in that.
We are very, very interested in hearing about the buffering.
Okay, so emotional buffering is pretty much, like I've mentioned before, we suppress negative emotions. We've never really been taught on how to work through them. And there are several ways that we suppress them and kind of push them down. It's not usually a push them down and look the other way as much as we'd like to think that's what it is. We use what are called buffering techniques. And this is a term coined by the life coach Brooke Castillo. And she has a podcast also called The Life Coach School. I highly recommend it as well. But she talks about buffering. And buffering is doing something so you do not have to feel the emotions or deal with the situation in your life. So going from like the most extreme to the most popular is overuse of drugs, right? Drugs are meant so that you don't have to deal with what's going on in your life right then. And in the extreme sense, overuse, excess use, sometimes addiction. And I feel like that's the least common because we're all told growing up, like, don't do drugs. But it is still up there in the range of stuff. The next one, which is more societally acceptable, is over drinking. Now, I'm not going to like full addict or full alcoholic on these kind of things, but doing it in excess. And here's like a good example. And it's been normalized. Like, oh my gosh, I had the most difficult day at work. I'm just going to go home and sit down with a glass of wine. Totally fine. But are you doing it because you just want the wine and it's self-care? And you're just like, I'm going to relax and enjoy myself? Or is it because you're not wanting to deal with the emotion that you had a frustrating day and why?
I feel verbally attacked just now. But for me, it would be whiskey though. Not the wine, it would be whiskey.
The whiskey. Well, and I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. I'm just pointing out that there are times, and everybody has different ones, where they may use an emotional buffer. So, and it's in excess. So, recreational drug use, that's up to you what is excess or not. Drinking, it's up to you what is excess or not. It's up to you what is using for emotional buffering versus using for like a form of entertainment. But those are like the two furthest away, right? Because you have to be pretty like full blown on those to have full buffering. But the next ones are way more common. So the next one is binge watching TV. And I personally, I'll connect a couple. I'll come back to that. But
Taylor,
binge watching
just so you know, sorry to cut you off, but you're just attacking me right now, okay? I feel like my life is being attacked because I will binge watch a show in a minute, and that's just, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that I'm personally attacking you. I'm not meaning to, I promise. But so the next one is, the binge watching TV. And I have a personal story about that one that combines with the next one, which is overeating. Eating to suppress and buffer your emotions, right? Because when we eat, then we kind of get this like, oh, I feel good, blah, blah, blah. And I don't have to worry about the fact I had a bad day or that this situation is going on in my life. And then the next, again, they're getting more and more popular as I come down the list. The next one is excess scrolling on social media. How often has it been that we come home and it's been a rough day and we don't want to deal with our emotions, so we're just going to get on social media for like 5 minutes, and it ends up being like an hour to an hour and a half. I'm personally raising my hand right now.
I've never been this much verbally attacked on my own show. The once you said the eating thing, I wasn't gonna say nothing. I was like, you know what, don't, because I eat a lot. I have a high metabolism because I'm always at the gym. So
Hmm.
I'm even hungry right now. But I'm just, I'll let you go ahead and just keep attacking me. That's fine.
But here's the thing. I am just pointing out that these are common buffering techniques. They may or may not be buffering techniques for you, but totally something to be aware of. So I'm going to share my story now. So I had a time in my life where I was not happy. I was really depressed. I was really lonely. And I also had work and coming home. And that was it. And in that time frame, it was about a year to a year and a half or so. And in that time frame, I lost all sense of who I was. And again, depressed, lonely, anxiety started creeping in, had nothing else going on. And my routine is that I would get up, usually late, and I would go to work. I would come home. I would get food, sit down in front of the TV, binge watch TV shows, and at the same time scroll through social media. Like I had the triple threat of I do not want to deal with my life right now. And I gotta say, it wasn't great. And I didn't want to deal with my life. And those were my buffering go tos. And I mean, when I say I went to the fridge and got food, this was not, it wasn't even food. It was like I'd get dinner and then I'd be like, well, I got to have something else because don't feel good. And like emotionally, and I didn't make those conscious decisions. I was just like, oh, I want more food. I'm bored or I'm hungry. And I would go to the store. Some of you are going to be real grossed out right now. I would go to the store and they had like those cans of, all right, the Betty Crocker whipped vanilla buttercream frosting. If anybody knows those, they are delicious. And I would get like the 10 for 10 deal and I would put them in my freezer. And then like when you pull them out of the freezer, they're kind of like frosting ice cream. I really good. I can't recommend it, obviously, because I was using it in a bad situation, but fantastically delicious. My favorite dessert is frosting, so there you go. And I would go until my stock ran out. And I just said I got 10 for 10, and I would go to the store on day 11. And I gained a whole bunch of weight, and I would stay up late binge watching and eating and scrolling, and then I'd feel guilty like I got nothing done that day. What's wrong with me? And I'd go to bed late. I wouldn't sleep well. I'd get up late. I'd go to work, and I would do it all over again. It was a guilt cycle. It was a shame cycle. It was a loneliness cycle. It was an angry cycle. I mean, it was all of these things. And it wasn't until I started working through my emotions and understanding like what I was doing to myself, and understanding that I wasn't dealing with my life. I was escaping it through food. I was escaping it through social media. I was escaping it through investing into TV shows instead of myself. And so I want to highlight, not because it's a personal attack, not because it's anything wrong with these things, but doing them in excess and being aware that, am I doing this because it's enjoyable, or am I doing it because I don't want to deal with something else and I'm trying to buffer from that emotion, can make all the difference in being aware and beginning that emotional journey, that emotional management journey.
Taylor, I've never ever met anybody that loves frosting as much as you do. Uh,
I
I
do
just,
love it. I don't have it anymore because it's not good for me, but I do love it.
I just want to say that first. Second, I get what you mean now when you say that. I mean, you're using it as a buffer to deal with things that's going on in your life that you don't want to face.
Yeah.
I get it now. That's very common. Especially the social media thing. That's very common. But it's like, it's about taking back control of your life, right? Like you said,
Hmm.
you once you got an understanding of why you were doing things the way you were and how it was unhealthy for you. That's when you were able to move on from eating that way, or consuming that, or just basically just existing. It sounds like that's what you were doing. You were just existing, pretty much.
Yep. Just
So
existing and watching TV.
binge watching what do people watch these days? Game of Thrones or something, whatever. Just existing. So
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to kind of share and outline some of those buffering techniques, because I think just an awareness of like, am I watching this because I'm thoroughly enjoying it? Is it, and here's the bonus, is it providing value in my life? And sometimes that value is that it's helping me buffer from things. And then you have that choice. Do I want to keep going this way, or do I want to change? And that's up to you. It's up to you what works best for you in that moment. But having an awareness of what those buffering things are is, again, that very first step. So I definitely wanted to share that as we were kind of tinging on emotional management there.
Figuring out why you're doing the things you're doing and the purpose behind them, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean,
what value are they providing?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to watch TV and it's okay to eat. It's just, just eat because you're hungry. Don't eat because you're dealing with something, pretty much. And then people know the difference. I mean, like you said, you're eating because of dinner. You're not killing a tub of ice cream, or in your case, Betty Crocker, was it vanilla frosting?
Vanilla whipped buttercream.
Vanilla
very precise.
Buttercream. So you were eating the
the entire can a day.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it was not. It was delicious, but it was not good, if you get what I'm saying. But I think too, like, even then, here's the thing, right? Understanding, going back to like what your templates are. So in that experience, I have two really big takeaways. Well, beyond the biggest takeaway of the emotional management piece, but I realized that for me personally, and there's nothing wrong with watching TV, but for me personally, I have a way of getting very quickly addicted to TV shows. They tend to be the thing that occupies my brain. I think about them until I can watch them again. I get very, very upset if something I'm very invested into the characters. And I had to ask myself, is this providing value in the kind of value that I want? And I realized that it really wasn't adding a lot to my life personally. And then the second thing is that I realized that I have a tendency to be an emotional eater. And what's really interesting is shortly after this time period, when I kind of got things back on track and I had an understanding and I started in this self-help personal development journey and I worked through the emotional management that was needed to get through that situation. Shortly after, I had a tragedy befall my family, and I had my three-year-old nephew was killed by a drunk driver. And as I sat with my niece, we were in my parents' home, and it was she and I and a few other people. And I was like, I kind of looked at her and I was like, all I want right now is a can of frosting. And I realized that I hadn't had one in so long because I'd been emotionally okay, but it was the first thing I wanted to go back to when tragedy was there and I didn't want to deal with the grief. And by then I had known that, like, wow, first off, the fact that my brain is like, nope, grief, this is not a good emotion. This is uncomfortable. Give us the frosting. The fact that I could be aware of that really helped me and allowed me to help some members of my family work through that grief without turning to a buffering technique or tool. And I mean, it's still a tragedy. It's still something that we all grieve about. It's still something to be upset about. But I can embrace and live in those emotions instead of pushing them away and not dealing with them. And so that was a big takeaway for me, is I got to see it in a very, very unfortunate incident, but I got to see it in real time and be highly aware of the choices that I was making based on emotional expression or emotional suppression.
Well, first of all, Taylor, I would like to say that I'm very sorry for the loss that your family had to endure. There was a collective gasp inside the chat room about it. I can't even imagine where I would be at mentally if that was to happen to me. But take something like that, like you said, for you to realize what you were using as a buffer For your mind to go straight towards that, straight towards the can of frosting, that's a very. I'm sorry. I'm just collecting myself as well. My mom says thank you for sharing and being so transparent.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to bring everybody down with that, but I first thing, I love my nephew, and I try to. He was 3. He was so happy, and I try to honor that by being happy and reminding others that they can be happy as well. But also, what can we learn from these tragedies in our lives? And I only can learn for myself, but I am honored to be able to share even that brief glimpse into my life if it can help other people understand and be aware of what they may be leaning on instead of leaning into.
Yeah, that's very powerful. That I'm just again, Taylor, I want to thank you for coming out and having a conversation with me tonight for Let's Talk It Out. You were very, very informative. You taught a lot of people your technique, your slave technique, and your buffering technique will be greatly utilized by the following and listeners of the Let's Talk It Out podcast. Someone says this message you share from this is greatly appreciated. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I am honored and delighted to be able to talk about the things that I love and to be able to share those techniques to hopefully help other people. So thank you.
And they definitely will. As someone said, it's very impactful. Yeah, it is. I'm just sitting here I'm analyzing my life right now, thinking about it. The buffering technique, and trust me, it's definitely going to be utilized. So, and
I have to say too, it's really, like, forewarning, it's really uncomfortable, because the reason we lean on the things that we buffer is because we do not want to deal with the uncomfortable emotions. And sometimes it's stuff that's been ingrained in us since we were younger, right? And I don't know where I got mine from, but I have other people in my life that have said, oh yeah, when there was a situation going on, my mom would give me food. So now I overeat instead of deal with my emotions. But what I'm getting to is I want to forewarn everyone, not to deter you, but to prepare you, that it can be really uncomfortable to go, whoa, I'm doing this because I don't want to feel lonely right now. And then making that choice to sit in the loneliness, to write it out, to slay using that technique, and to then take those steps of progression versus stagnation. It's really uncomfortable, but really transformative if you're willing to take those steps.
And it's like I was literally just thinking about that in my mind when people ask me about, I always tell them that for someone to actually make big changes in their life, they have to be uncomfortable, because any living animal or creature, if you put them in an uncomfortable situation, they're going to fight like hell to get out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to fight like hell to get out of it. In order for you to actually make changes in your life, you have to force yourself to be uncomfortable. There can't be a sense of comfort if you want things to change. I'm sorry, it has to be an urgency. So like you said, it's not to deter anybody, but going through like the slay technique and the buffering technique, we have to be prepared to be uncomfortable, because that's very necessary for you to make the changes in life that you need to make.
Absolutely. And I would go a step further and say, whether it's through declarations or not, like identifying who it is that you want to be. Who is the legend version? Who is the hero version, the warrior version? Who is that person that you want to be? Who is your best, most ideal self? And then when you're looking discomfort in the face, you keep in mind who that is that you want to be, that person you're striving for, and you can look it in the face and fight. But you have to know that step to be able to fight and fight successfully, to get through the discomfort and really power up your life. So I would add that as another thing, like writing out, even if it's a few sentences, of who it is that you want to be, and then using that as a North Star to align you and take you on this journey of self-development and emotional management.
Again, I want to thank you one more time, Taylor, for taking time out of your busy life and your busy week to have this conversation with us. Jackie says, thank you so much for sharing. At this time, I want to go ahead and ask you, do you have any like closing remarks for the chat room? Any last bits of advice? Because you gave so much advice tonight. I mean, I'm not sure how much more you could possibly have.
Oh, I'm a wealth of knowledge over here. No, again, just face that discomfort and look it in the eye and know that you're fighting for you. You're fighting for you and your best life. And there's nothing more valuable or worthy to fight for. And then I'm just going to be kind of a nerd here and quote my own closing part of my podcast. But above everything else in this entire conversation, like, thank you all for your comments. And I'm so honored and so excited to be with you tonight. But above everything else, if you take away nothing else from today's episode or today's show or my remarks, I just want to remind you that you are capable of happiness abound.
Excellent. And, again, I mean, I gave people your link to your Instagram page inside the chat room because they were asking how would they contact you. So they should probably be reaching out to you through that. Like I said, I want to thank everybody for listening in live tonight. If you haven't listened in live tonight, the podcast will be available wherever you listen to podcasts. I got it everywhere. So I look forward to talking to you guys in 2 days. We'll be back on Thursday for the Let's Talk It Out podcast.